All right, so welcome back to Happy Hour with Heather and Guest. I'm that other dude, Andrew, and as always, I'm joined by Heather.
Hello.
And today we are going to discuss episode number 75, which focuses on a band called Spotlights.
Yeah.
And this was Heather's turn in the rotation, so I will give you the reins and you can kick us off.
Okay. Spotlights. The reason that I like Spotlights so much is because their delivery of doom gaze is just absolutely incredible. And their latest album, it's called Alchemy for the Dead. And this album goes way beyond anything that I expected. This album has the wonderful post-metal parts and the post-rock. Also has moments of goth, alternative, and some of it reminded me of 90s industrial like Nine Inch Nails. Um, I was listening to it. I was also reminded of Deftones, which is like really amazing because I I went online and I was reading some reviews, and one of the reviews mentioned that Chino Moreno is a huge fan of this band and had asked them to go on tour with them years ago. So that just absolutely blew my mind. And then Mike Patton of Faith No More signed them to his record label and has that was several years ago and they have stayed on. So I thought that was pretty amazing too. So when you mentioned that this band is big, it is. It is. Yes. Um, you mentioned bands that are modern and then they carry the torch, forward. And I think this band is a perfect example of that. To me, it feels fresh and expansive, and somehow this music, it gets its claws into you, and this is not anything that you're going to forget anytime soon.
That's true. What's interesting is I think you're much more familiar with Doomgaze, and a little bit more aware of of that as a genre. Like I wasn't familiar with it so much. If someone had said, "Hey, do you like Doomgaze?" I'd probably just nod along and be like, "Of course, I like all Doom related things."
Yeah, yeah.
But I looked up. I actually found an article on Medium that I thought would be helpful. Someone named Wyvern wrote this article, Wyyvern, and he or she says, "Imagine heavy, droning, metallic wall of sound riffs, instead played at the pace of a doom metal record. And over the top of that, add lighter tones, melodies, and ethereal vocals of shoegaze to create a balance of sound. This soft, heavy contrast is core to what makes up Doomgaze, and it becomes a recognizable, defining sound once you've stuck your feet into a dozen or so releases." So it was interesting because I don't necessarily, when you hear someone explain what defines a genre, you lose some of the magic to it. But this was helpful to kind of understand some of the nuances. Like, oh, okay, so it's sort of like, I guess, if you're tasting wine and someone is like, look for these notes or look for these. So just knowing that going in, it was easier to appreciate. So I listened to Alchemy for the Dead first, and then I went back to Seismic, which was released in 2017, because continuing on in that same article, Wyvern suggests posits the question, right? So it's shoegazy doom metal. So then he writes, well, not quite. Long, drawn-out riffs and slow tempo of doom metal are certainly present on many releases, but it's not a doom metal subgenre. 2017 would be the largest year yet, One, where the genre's prominence would start to grow outwards with the release of some large albums. Pale Horse, Pale Rider's debut album, Burial Songs, would prove rather popular in underground circles. And then he suggests uh, Spotlights would deliver Atmos sludge tinted doomgaze with Seismic. So once I heard that, I went back and listened to Seismic. So this
Yeah.
was a really interesting episode for me because I'm not as familiar. Like, I know you're a fan of most of the gaze, anything that has, GAZE in it, doom
Yeah.
gaze, shoegaze, post gaze, whatever gaze. So going into it, I sort of knew that, but I wasn't as familiar with what I was going to expect. So it was interesting going in. And then I also noticed that they were signed to Ipecac Records, which is Mike Patton's label, which
Yeah.
which was interesting because I know like Melvin's released stuff on Ipecac now, and I guess obviously so does Mr. Bungle, and probably a ton of other bands. But it was interesting that there doesn't really seem to be like a specific criteria. It's just if you make good music, you can probably find your way on his label. So that was cool. Yeah, it was great. I mean, there is a lot of really interesting facets to it that I'm sure someone could write a doctoral dissertation explaining the differences between, the doom gaze, post metal, shoegaze, what have you. I think on the one hand, it's great because it helps you sort of catalog what you're listening to, and on the other hand, it provides fodder for people who like to argue. So it does sort of everything. The only question I had now that hadn't been answered, and I didn't really look too deep, was where they got the name Spotlights and what that might mean outside of just like the literal spotlight. I was trying to think. I couldn't really think. I mean, aside from some of the previous bands who had more cryptic band names, where it was sort of like there could be, like for example, Murloc. We still don't know where they got their name. Um, so I was curious whether or not Spotlights was like if there was a particular reason they chose that, or if it just because it's interesting. And then I began going down this rabbit hole of like, well, what does a band name do? Like, what? How important is a band name? Where does it fact? Would you not see a band because you didn't like their name? Not that they have a connotation or anything, but like, how does that play into it?
I think it's super important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
so I could see how some people might look at the band and say, well, I wish they'd had a more interesting name or a more provocative name. So I was curious just to hear what the genesis of their name was. Um,
Yeah.
but the music is great. It does have that really atmospheric sound to it, with a lot going on. At first, I was sort of like, okay, well, this is nice. This is sort of like a wall of sound. And then I began to notice, like, oh, no, 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 there's a lot going on here that will need, and it's the type of music you can just have on in the background. Like, you don't, there's some music we listen to where it's like, no, 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 you have to be riding shotgun in a car that's driving 88 miles per hour because you need to activate the flux capacitor, but you also need to be in that pocket to hear the song the way it's made to be played. So with this one, I was like, oh no, I could listen to Spotlights running errands. I could listen to Spotlights just chilling on the couch. It was,
I, I think that description, I think that article you read with that description of Doomgaze, I think that's a perfect description. I think they did a really good job of describing what it is, you know. And
yeah. I
that,
mean, I'm sorry not to cut you off.
yeah, like And it's cool that they mentioned Pale Horse, Pale Rider because, in my opinion, I think like if you're not familiar with what Doomgaze is, I think that album is a really good example to try to like so you can hear what it sounds like.
Yeah, well, they do. The author does a great job explaining sort of the building blocks of Doomgaze, but I also feel like they didn't take the magic out of it. It's
Yeah,
so if I were to go back, there'd still be some mystery. It would still be sort of like, okay, why? How are they making this all come together the way they are? So I appreciate. I unfortunately I don't know the author's given name. I just know it's Wyvern. Um,
and
but
another thing too about Doomgaze is, you would think that all of it sounds alike, like the different bands that play that style of music. You would think that, oh, they're all going to sound the same and it all sounds alike. But I've not listened. I myself personally have not listened to two bands that play Doomgaze that sound alike. They it can be so different from each other. It can be within the same genre, but it can sound so incredibly different, you know. And a lot of these bands and this music, they it sounds so different from each other, but you can tell it's the same. It has like the same undertones and everything, but the nuances of it are just so different.
oh, absolutely. Well, it's sort of like Nirvana and Alice in Chains are both grunge, but
Yeah,
you would never confuse their music for
right.
sure. Um,
Yeah,
just like you could throw on Pale Horse, Pale Rider, and then listen to Spotlights and recognize, okay, this is both in the same genre, but they're clearly different bands.
yeah,
So
yeah. And they
yeah,
each they each do their own thing, and what they're doing, they just do it so well.
yeah. Well, I know Spotlights has a couple of more albums in their catalog that I didn't listen to. So now that I sort of have a better appreciation of what to take note of, um, so you've essentially been my sommelier as we've gone into this experience, sort of like provide like listen to Spotlights. They're a great example of Doomgaze, and you had suggested Pale Horse, Pale Rider before, so it's almost as if you're providing the context for me to enter this and get a really good appreciation for the music. So I
Yeah.
am grateful for that.
Yeah. And and I told you this week, it's not space rock. We're back to Earth.
We are back, yes. No more. We have gotten rid of the boosters. We have returned back to our atmosphere. We are listening to now. It's atmospheric music,
It
certainly,
is. Yeah. It
but
is. Yeah.
we are not in the stratosphere anymore. We are back on
Right.
Earth.
Yes.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to revisiting Spotlights, just going through their entire catalog. Um, this was. I'm glad that I like space rock. I'm glad that we're back on Earth and we're mixing things up a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and if any of the members of Spotlights would like to share what the origin of their band name is, that would be awesome. I don't need to know because, again, I like having there being some mystery. But if you want to either DM me or Heather and let us know, and I will keep it in the vault. I won't tell anyone. So
Yeah. Oh, and I saw when I was looking up this album and reading some of the reviews on it, and I did see that there was an interview with the band where they went song by song and they kind of explained, what all the songs mean and everything. And I was just thinking, oh, you know, I wonder if, if they do have an interview out there where they do mention what their band name means to them.
It's
And it
entirely
happened.
possible. Now, would you want to read that interview where they explain the songs?
Oh, I'm kind of like you. I kind of like the mystery of it, you
Yeah,
know? I mean, I know the overall theme of the record is it's about death, you know, and how people deal with it. But I'm kind of like you. I kind of like the mystery, and when you listen to it, interpreting what it means to you.
yeah. I remember I was in at summer camp one year, and my counselor played a song for us by REM, and I remember he asked us to explain to him what we all thought the song was about.
Yeah,
And I'm gonna blank the title. It was I just remember it was about a firehouse and some guy at the firehouse. I should have had it just popped into my head. Otherwise, I would have had the title ready to go. But but then he would listen to what we had to say, and then he would offer his interpretation of it.
yeah,
So it was cool that like at no point did any of us ever actually learn what the song was about, but
yeah,
we had the 12-year-old interpretation of it, and then he was probably in his 20s, so we had the 25-year-old interpretation of it. And I just remember one thing he talked about was how the guy who hangs out at the firehouse was an alcoholic because the one of the lyrics was "and words of wisdom pouring from his mouth." The 25-year-old interpreted that as to being he was getting sick. So whether or not that's true, and if
yeah,
any of the members of REM wish to reach out to us and confirm or deny, um, but yeah,
yeah,
no, that's there's a certain amount of mystery. I mean, I think it would be fascinating to hear like perhaps how Spotlights writes some of their songs or like what their influences are, but
yeah.
I don't know if I would want to see behind the curtain.
Yeah. And
But
it's kind of like lyrics too, and how people hear lyrics,
sure,
and what the lyrics mean to you versus what they might mean to someone else, you
sure.
know.
Well, once you author something and you put it out in the world, it's just subject to interpretation, and
Yeah.
it means whatever the person wants it to mean.
Like
So,
any art,
yep,
like any kind of art. Yeah, it's subject to your interpretation of it.
yeah. Well, I look forward to going back and revisiting Spotlights and interpreting what I discover. I will probably not read that article just to keep the mystery going, but
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you suggested we listen to them.
Oh, thank you.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
cool. All right. Well, any other thoughts or insights?
Not that I can think of.
Okay, yeah. Well, we'll be back next week for
Yes.
sure. I think it's my turn, and we are doing Grotto.
Grotto.
Yes, which I think I found. I want to say in 2015. Just in a YouTube spelunking mission. They're a pretty good doom band. So I look forward to discussing them with you next week.
Yeah, Doom.
Yep, we're going back. I mean, Doom
We're going
Gaze.
back to Doom.
We're going back to Doom.
We're
So
going back to
we're going home.
I feel like Doom, I just feel like for us, like Doom is just like this warm blanket that you can just cover yourself with,
Oh yeah, we're covering ourselves in warm doom.
Yes.
That didn't sound as good as I'd hoped, but either way, that should go. I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm
Yeah.
excited. I mean, we always discuss great music, and it's nice that uh, that within the framework of sort of metal, we're exploring different facets of it. If it's more progressive, if it's space, if it's psychedelic, if it's doom. But you're right, doom is like putting on that jacket that fits That's just so nice.
Yeah.
Or that warm blanket.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, cool. Well, let's
Yeah.
we will return next week for Grotto.
That sounds awesome. Can't wait.
Me neither.